So today we're doing episode 80, and it's a little bit weird, episode 80, because it's the second time we're filming episode 80.
Right.
But we're going to finish our your exploration of, the name just...
Linda Ronstadt.
Yeah, Linda Ronstadt. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to do Shechem Part 2.
Yeah.
Episode 80 of the Deep Dives.
Sounds good. Shechem Part 2.
Shechem Part 2.
Now, that sounds like it could be a book in the Bible.
Right.
Shechem. Second take, whatever.
Yeah.
But I will talk about
First
Linda
and
Ronstadt.
second Shechem.
That's right, exactly. I'll talk about Linda Ronstadt.
Yeah. Well, we had some audio troubles last time.
Yeah,
we were experimenting with some new lapel mics, and we didn't quite get it right. And the audio was just not good. So instead of forcing Chris to spend hours meticulously going through every phrase and correcting it digitally, we said, let's just record it again.
That's what we're going to do.
So nobody knows that.
Yeah. Now they do. But we have a text conversation going about what we do here and where we're going to meet and all that. And like I told y'all in that text conversation, you don't have to force me to listen to Linda Ronstadt again for another straight week. I'm good with that. I took one day off and listened to some Eagles and I always got to get Metallica in there, but then I started listening to Linda Ronstadt again, downloaded another one of her books. She's got 2 books, and I downloaded the other one, which is a memoir of her musical career. And that's what I was more looking for. The first one that I downloaded and started listening to was more about what she's doing today, which is interesting. And she's a very huge advocate of Arizona and Mexican immigrants and Mexican music of today. And she advocates for children to learn the heritage of Mexico. Fantastic stuff. Really, really good stuff. It makes me wish that I was that proud of where I'm from, and wanted to and felt the need or the desire to not only advocate but put my money where my mouth is and really teach people about what life is about, where we're from. And she does that so well. Now I sent y'all a recent 6 years ago, the video that I sent y'all yesterday that shows her being interviewed on Sunday morning, I think it was. Sunday morning at CBS, something like that. It really struck an emotional chord with me. It was really difficult to see her where she is, I'll say now, but that video was 6 years ago.
Right.
And the disease that she has is very much like Parkinson's. It's a type of Parkinson's. And her, she has uncontrollable shaking of her hand and her body. And it was just sad for me to see that, because I kind of fooled myself into thinking, the last 3 weeks, watching all these 1970s to 80s videos of Linda Ronstadt at her prime in the early 70s, and as she grew into the 80s. Kind of fooled myself thinking that's today.
Right.
And then
kind of subconsciously.
Yep. Didn't know I was doing that.
Right.
But then I saw some recent things, and you know how social media is. The algorithm starts feeding you things for what you're watching. By the way, I want to say this. If you're a guy and you happen to be watching skateboarding or cycling, something like that, and the algorithm sends you something that you didn't ask for, which might be something like a lady dressed in a lady dressed in a bikini riding a bicycle, because that fits the algorithm. They'll send you a bunch of those.
Yes.
But it took me a couple of days to get Linda Ronstadt stuff.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like they know what guys' weaknesses are. They know what my weakness is.
Well, here's what's interesting about that. Not to get us derailed onto a different topic.
But I think it's worth talking about.
Yeah,
man.
Because a lot of people talk about how we train the algorithm, and there's there's a lot of truth to that. But what I think is ironic is in our modern culture where we're constantly bombarded with stuff like gender is fluid, and there's it's all on a spectrum, and there's no such thing as traditional gender roles or binary roles, stuff like that. What's interesting is when I first made an Instagram account, it asked you for some basic information. My goodness, it started I had never interacted with this before.
Mm-hmm.
And it started sending me stuff that like a typical red-blooded American male would be interested
for
in
sure,
seeing.
right off.
And
most guys would go right for it too.
Absolutely. And what I found ironic about that is how the algorithm is fueled by data from all of the users, right? And so it was predicting the most likely combination of content that would appeal to me as the person I am.
That's what happens.
And it's interesting how it tends to follow those binary traditional gender role type things.
Yeah, right.
Fortunately, I've trained the algorithm over the time. It sends me a lot of videos about machining and engineering and stuff like that. But every now and then, not every now and then, it will keep trying. Like, hey, you're probably interested in this too, right?
It's just waiting for you to crack that door open just a little bit, even if it's intentional, unintentional.
And see, I made the mistake at first too, because I Googled like how do I keep this kind of content from appearing, and it would say like on the video, click on the top right side, whatever, and say not interested or whatever. And so I did that for a time, and more started coming, and so I'd read about it, and like, and what I sort of ascertain or determined from this was, because I'm clicking on it so that I can click on it and say not interested, that original click registers as, he's going to click on this.
Oh, my gosh.
And so I'm like, okay, so I just have to not engage with it whatsoever.
Right. Act like it's not there.
Yeah. And
if that's possible.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, it's a weird thing. Yeah.
Even anecdotal, you can tell that happens. And what you're saying is you've proven that is what the algorithm does.
Right.
And anecdotally, I can definitely back that up, because I still watch skateboarding sometime, and and I like watching pet videos. And so this one channel popped up of this girl skating on roller skates, not inline skating, but roller skates. And she was going in parks and everything. It was awesome. And her dog was following her. And I was digging that. You know what I mean? That was really cool, because she was not just skating. She was going, getting air and all that stuff. I'll come to find out, I watched a couple of those videos, and she was dressed in whatever. I mean, she was kind of skimpily dressed, but I was watching the dog, and I was coming to find out every now and then she puts on a G-string, and she starts, right. And I'm like, I went from watching this dog and a skater to watching this girl in a G-string, and where's the dog now? The dog's not even, and now, you get all this other peripheral stuff. Like,
right.
It's already hard enough for guys. It's every man's battle to put that aside.
Right.
It's not easy to do it. And my wife and I have this we had this conversation. Look, I'm not blind. You're not blind. It's got to be an intentional decision to avert your eyes, to not dwell in that desire, outside of marriage. So anyway, we got off base, but we need to talk. We need to have a whole podcast on that.
It's a good argument for, especially if you're married, always allowing your significant other to have full unfettered access to your phone.
Absolutely.
Know your passwords, all that stuff, just as an accountability measure.
Absolutely. There's been times where something has popped up on mine, and I've said, Donna, just so you know, I had the conversation I just had with you guys, about watching the skater or whatever. And I said, it wasn't my intention to do that. And it's never an issue.
A lot of influencers like it's kind of a well-known thing where you want to sort of branch out from the content that you're wanting to do, because that might not cater. Like, for instance, she wants to do stuff, this particular influencer wants to do stuff that's revealing and all that stuff because a lot of people like that. But there are some people who aren't interested in that. So throw a dog in there, do something where she's doing cool skateboard tricks, because someone who's interested in that, who might not be interested in the other, will watch that. But then that gets her foot in the door as a content creator. And now she's part of your algorithm. Now the other stuff is going to be suggested that might persuade someone to watch more of her content.
It's a tricky spot, and if you can, or I can imagine being. Listen, self-control is something that we always struggle with. Everybody struggles with that. But if I wasn't intentionally watching my self-control, how easy it would be just to fall into.
Right.
I can sit
it's
here
just readily available.
I can waste an hour watching cute kitty videos. What if I'm stuck? What if I don't have the wherewithal to stay away from the temptation of looking at other women? I could sit here, waste an hour or more. That's a hole that doesn't have a bottom.
Right.
I mean, it's
and I mean, when you're talking about supply and demand, the demand is there so much, and the supply is there so much.
You know what? This is one of the things that I like about Linda Ronstadt. Her shyness. You asked me last time, what is it that I like about her? And that was going to be my topic today. So I'll transition into that. What I like about Linda Ronstadt.
Yeah.
I like her style. If I just had to one sentence, it would be it. Her style. She could come into this room and get a microphone, and we would sit there, and she would entertain us just like she would if she was in a multi-million-dollar studio. And she'd walk in. It would sound a little better, and because the microphones would be better. We've proven that here. We tried some microphones last week, didn't work. These are the old tried and true so far. But yet, there's always that Shure microphone that's a $350 or $400 microphone. It doesn't matter who's talking into it. It sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But these are fine, right? Linda Ronstadt can stand on the stage anywhere. Proof positive, there's hundreds of videos of her in the 70s and 80s doing exactly that, standing on Don Kirshner's rock concert, Saturday night, whatever, on Johnny Carson. You can tell, first of all, I'm not sure if they had the technology back then to sync the voice in the video that well.
Right.
But you can tell that she's singing. This is not the same version that we hear on the radio.
Yeah.
But her tone and her pitch and everything is spot on. She may say a word a little bit differently or whatever, so you can tell it's live. But you are just as entertained, I am anyway, of watching her stand there in the conservative dress, but sexy.
Right.
You know what I mean? She may show a little midriff or whatever, but she's not at all tempting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't feel guilty watching her.
Right.
Watching her perform, because she's beautiful. She's
inherently attractive.
She's inherently attractive.
Yeah.
Even she doesn't even have she's her teeth are white, but they're not totally straight. And I'm thinking that makes her even more attractive. Yeah. She's not that concerned, to get her teeth totally straight. And this is a woman who makes her living out of opening her mouth in front of millions of people.
Yeah.
And some people have said, Linda, you might want to consider, getting some braces or something.
There's something to be said for beauty and imperfection.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good example of it. One of the questions that you just made me think of, when it comes to listening to a song on a CD or a record or a tape or whatever versus hearing it in real life, one of the things that I've experienced is when I listen to a song on an album, and I listen to it so much that I can it's like I not only have the lyrics memorized, but I have the instruments memorized, and when an instrument comes in, what it does, and like I used to listen. We've talked about how I like bluegrass. There are some songs that I have committed to memory so well that like when the mandolin solo comes in, I can hum along to the tune of the mandolin.
Yes, sir. I understand.
And,
yes.
that kind of stuff.
Right.
But then when I see it in real life, sometimes they'll do some subtle change to it that's either in the moment or just because they have a different live version than they did the studio version.
Right.
Or the song has evolved since the 10 years ago that they recorded that album, something like that. And sometimes it's a really neat change, and sometimes it's like, I don't like that. I like the way it was on the album. How does that make you feel?
Kind of both. I like the energy. It depends on the artist too. Kansas, I don't think I've seen Kansas, but I've seen Kansas, the band, video. They don't sound anything like. They don't sound as good. His voice just does not carry.
Right.
He's got a very high voice. To me, it's difficult for me to be entertained watching Kansas in concert than I am listening, because I can listen to him all the time because his high voice and whatever they do to make it sound better, they do. But I still like the energy of a live band. I don't like it whenever the energy speeds up the tempo.
Right.
In a video or in concert. To me, especially if it's supposed to be a slow song and they're sandwiching it in between two fast songs, perhaps, and the drummer just can't help it. He's so psyched up that loses it for me. But live music like the Grateful Dead or Fish or Linda Ronstadt or somebody like that, who made their living traveling from place to place to place to place all over the world to play live music, because back in the day, that's how they made their money. Not so much now, but I don't really know how the music industry works now, but I think it has actually turned around to where you've got to travel now to make money as music. But anyway, I'm not sure about that. Back then, that's all it was. That you did that after you put out an album.
Right.
Right? You put out an album, then you did the tour for that album. That was the workflow. Back then, I loved it. I would rather watch and listen to a live performance, especially somebody like Linda Ronstadt or Freddie Mercury, Carrie Underwood, Ann Wilson of Heart, Adele, or Patsy Cline. Those are the people. I'll say that list again. These are the people who, in my opinion, and people that are much smarter than me and much more into the music industry, say that these people have technically perfect voices. Freddie Mercury of Queen, Carrie Underwood, Ann Wilson of Heart, and Patsy Cline, and Linda Ronstadt. Now,
well, you also mentioned Adele.
Adele.
Yeah.
Yes, also Adele. You can listen to any one of these people, and even if you're not a music person, you're going to say, man, they sure can sing.
Right.
And it is the truth. They not only sure can sing, but they can sing perfectly, technically perfectly.
There is a video, speaking of Adele, there was a video that I saw on YouTube where it was kind of like a prank type video or whatever, but they had an Adele impersonating competition. And so all these people who are fans of Adele could sing just like her or whatever, got dressed up like her, did their makeup like her and everything.
Boy.
And they were doing this little competition. But the twist was one of the contestants was actually Adele.
Oh,
but
nice.
they didn't tell anybody that.
Oh, that's
And they're just
good.
like, all right, this is, Mary from, Essex or something like that. And, she's contestant number 12. And she comes in and she starts singing. And, like, when she started singing, immediately everybody was like, hold on a second.
Something's wrong here.
Like, this is either Adele or a clone of Adele, because like there was a quality in her voice that didn't exist in all the other contestants, and so people figured out pretty quickly, like, oh wow, this is the real Adele.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see. I like the way you said that. There's a quality about her voice.
Yeah,
and sometimes sometimes you can't put your finger on it.
Yeah, that's why they call it the it factor.
It's
right?
the it factor. Yeah. One of Linda Ronstadt's producers. Actually, it wasn't a producer. Anyway, person that knew Linda Ronstadt really well said that she would put a shine on her voice. So she'd hit a note, and she'd put a little bit of extra on that note that other people don't know how to do.
Right.
That's the shine. Right. So you can hit a high C. Anybody can hit a high C that can sing.
Yeah.
But you put a little bit of extra on it, even if you don't know you're doing it. Maybe whatever you're doing physiologically in your throat or in your diaphragm, whatever, you put that little bit of shine on it. That's what makes it unique. And whenever I heard that, I knew exactly what he was talking about. I never called it a shine. I just knew that's the Linda Ronstadt.
Yeah.
That's what she has that nobody else has. Some people might call it a
Something
growl.
that's characteristically Linda.
Very characteristically
Yeah.
Linda. And it's almost as you kind of think that something physiologically is happening in there that she possesses that other people don't possess, so
And
they can't possibly do it.
Yeah, it might not even be something she's doing on purpose either. That's just how her physiology responds to the emotion of the song or something, you know?
Speaking of emotion of a song, my gosh, she's a very emotional. And she says that she quotes about her voice. She says, "My voice lends itself to ballad singing," and
oh yeah, I can see that.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Most of the songs she sings, other people wrote, and maybe this is one of the unique things about Linda Ronstadt. It's not unique for musicians to sing other people's songs or play other people's songs, music. What's unique is that I want y'all to think about this too. How fantastic this is. A song that has already been put out and successful, she redoes it and it becomes more successful. I don't know how you do that.
Right.
I mean, how good you have to be to make that happen is I don't even know how to describe that. And not only that, but the people who wrote the song say, I couldn't do it that good.
Yeah.
I can't do this song that I wrote about my life. I can't do it as good as she can, and I can't sell it.
Well,
like she
a good
can.
example of that is "I Will Always Love You" by Dolly Parton.
Right.
Made famous by Whitney Houston.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Maybe Whitney. I didn't know Whitney that way. She may have one of those voices too that's maybe technically perfect. I don't know.
Quite possibly.
Yeah,
I don't think your list was exhaustive.
It certainly wasn't. It was who I thought of, right?
Yeah.
But when I think of Whitney Houston, I think Star Spangled Banner. Whenever she did Star Spangled Banner, wow, was that a moment in time or what?
I remember in the early days of the Gun Club, that the group we teach in at church, you played that in one, because I forget why, but you played that for some reason.
I played music sometime in videos to get people in the mood.
Yeah.
Then we did the Bible
contrast that with Fergie from Black Eyed Peas doing the Star Spangled Banner. Night and day difference.
Right.
Not even in the same category.
She, now that I think about her, what's her name again? Whitney Houston. Yeah. I'm also not thinking about her too much. She did seem like one of those people who could sing in front of a microphone. I'm not as visually entertained by her because of, I don't know, just who she was, but I think she could bring it wherever she was.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? She could bring it.
And it looked effortless.
It did look effortless, just like talking about.
Yeah, same as Linda Ronstadt.
That's another unique thing about Linda Ronstadt is that if you watch her, and I would, people that are listening, watching, I would prompt you to just watch a couple of songs. There's thousands of Linda Ronstadt, and Blue Bayou. Watch Blue Bayou. It's a very dynamic song. So she starts off just singing like she's talking, And before long, she is up in a register that most singers cannot even hit. Mm-hmm. They can't even hit it, Josh. And she does it without even changing the tone of the look on her face. Mm-hmm. And she does it for just like a second and then brings it back down and then starts talking. It's that effortlessness is very attractive. Another reason I like her. I used to love watching George Hincapie ride his bicycle. Mm-hmm. He was one of Lance Armstrong's captains. And he was with Lance during most of his, or if not all, at least 6 of his 7 Tour de France wins. And this guy, learned from him to not allow your face to feel the stress that the rest of your body's feeling. So just talk your face into having a flat face, no matter how much you're straining. What that does, at least in cycling, is 2 things. One, it can fool yourself. One, physiologically, you're not wasting energy. Mm-hmm. That's not doing anything for anybody. That holding your arms really tight, it's not
those
doing
who might be listening to this, you're making really strenuous face shapes.
Right. And stretching or tensing by arms. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, if I'm right, that's not doing much either. So you learn to isolate where your body is really needing the energy. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what Linda does. She her body, she doesn't tense up whenever she's singing. She'll just hold the microphone. She may put her head back like this, but everything she does just seems to be cute. You know what I mean? It adds to her doing what she's doing.
So I want to go back to 2 things that you mentioned, because it made me think of some questions. So first one, you mentioned a video that you sent, you texted to me and Chris earlier this week, that there's an interview of her 6 years ago. And one of the things that she mentioned there is, like, because of this advanced Parkinson's, I forget what the name of the actual thing was, but what we said, a version of Parkinson's. Mm-hmm. She was talking in this interview, and it shows like how her hands shake when she's eating, things like that. And she said that she's unable to sing anymore. Yeah. And that kind of struck me as odd, because like in my mind, thinking about this just from as a technical engineer who doesn't have any performance talent, it seems like if you can talk, you should be able to sing, right? Because like, assume somewhere in between talking and singing, where you're talking but you're holding a syllable for a split second longer, and then you hold it for a split second long, whatever. To me, it seems like there's a short distance between talking and singing. Where is that line where is that line drawn between your body's ability to carry a tune anymore? Is it just that she can't hit notes, or she can't expend the energy to hold syllables for long periods of time, or something like that? That's something that I kind of came away from that video wanting to do a little bit more research on, because that seemed interesting to me.
I think what you'll find is this. I think it's the same difference in being able to walk and being able to run a marathon. Mm-hmm. We can all walk. Theoretically, we could all run a marathon if we trained, but we're certainly not going to do it today, right? I think with her voice and anybody's voice, I think I'll say again, the physical part of that, I think we take for granted. Mm-hmm. If you watch Carrie Underwood sing with Vince Gill in the song, I always forget the name of the song, but it's not Amazing Grace.
How Great Thou Art.
How Great Thou Art. If you watch Carrie Underwood and Vince Gill play and sing How Great Thou Art, you will see how singing is very akin to an athletic endeavor, because the camera is on Carrie Underwood most of the time, and you can see how she breathes in and breathes out and rests. And I've obviously watched this video a couple of times. We've played it in Gun Club again, And it struck me of how she is tensing up, unlike Linda Ronstadt, but she's doing it in a very athletic way. Mm-hmm. And she's at least whenever this was out, I don't know about recently, but she's a person who who takes care of herself. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you don't look like she looks, or anybody doesn't look like that without at least watching what you eat and working out and doing that kind of thing. So with her voice, by the way, maybe another technical perfect singer, Carrie Underwood, perhaps.
Well, she was on your list.
Oh, she was?
Yeah.
Did I say Carrie Underwood?
Yep.
I'm smarter than I thought I was.
I agree with myself.
I don't have a good memory, but I'm smarter than I thought. But you can see how she is like a runner or like a cyclist. Very strategically placed breaths and exertions and rests and everything else. That takes a lot of energy. Yeah. A lot of energy.
And maybe that goes back to what Parkinson's does. And here, obviously not an expert at this, just spitballing. But like the inability to like hold your hand out and hold it steady might be akin to your inability to control the muscles that hold a note.
Sure.
And maybe that's the where the delineation is between talking and singing.
Right. Either
talking is less disciplined.
Right. In that same video or a different video I saw, I just saw clips. She did sing with her nephew and somebody else in their family, but she was whisper singing. You know what I mean? So she was able to sing really, really quietly, very quietly. So, yeah, she can't sing, and I've heard and read and lived this, what I'm about to tell you, that once you're at a level of performance and you can't get to that level anymore, it's not uncommon to quit the whole thing. Do you understand what I'm saying? Cycling with me was like that. Once I got to a level and I quit for a while and I came back and I'm like, man, I'm never going to, wait a minute, Destry, you don't ever want to do that. So I had to do it. I had to learn. I had a different attitude towards cycling and learned that I still loved it and wanted to continue to do it, knowing I'm never going to perform like I used to perform. A good buddy of mine, Steve Stroop, lost his leg in the Navy, and he didn't ever want. I was trying to get him out to play golf again because he used to love to play golf. He says, "Man, I'm never going to be as good as I was before." And that was a real stumbling stone for him, to get over that. Yeah. And it took him a while, but he did get back into the to playing golf. But it was after he realized I'm going to play, but I'm going to play different, before. So perhaps with Linda, boy, at that level,
right?
Hard to get back to.
So my second question, because I had two questions. One was about the voice and the singing thing. But something else you mentioned made me think of this about how when we were talking about Dolly Parton and Whitney Houston and Linda Ronstadt, like singing a song that someone else did, doing it better. What's your opinion just in general about when people do covers of other songs?
If you'd have asked me 4 weeks ago, I would have said I don't really like it. But most of Linda's songs are covers. So I got to change my attitude on that. If it's a cover, I can listen to her do it. Right. And I could probably listen to Carrie Underwood do anything, probably listen to Dolly Parton do anything. Yeah. One of the things that even I don't realize, even trying to be cognizant of this stuff, is a lot of the songs that we know and we think that this person has recorded for the first time is a song from the 40s or a song from the 50s. But we know it as this person singing it, and it's not actually that. I guarantee you most of the song, at least some of the songs that we know and love, a certain percentage of those are redone from the past. Now, it was different whenever you redo one from the 40s if you're in the 90s. Right. You know what I mean? It can be redone and make it your own. But to do it within the same 10-year period, that's unique.
See, with me, I love cover songs. Sometimes I'll just go down a rabbit hole on YouTube and just type in cover songs. Because what I really like is if it's a song that I enjoy from a particular artist, I love listening to it done by another artist who puts their own spin on it.
That's different to me.
Yeah. Like if all you're doing is just copying it verbatim, that's not really that big of a deal. But so there's a couple like YouTube channels / artists that come to mind. So there's this YouTube channel called BBC Live Lounge, which BBC, British Broadcasting Company or whatever. But they have this channel where like a modern artist will do a cover of another popular song by a modern artist. So it's not like a song from the past. It's like these two peers are doing each other's songs, and they'll put their own twist on it. And a lot of times that's really, really cool. Sometimes it's an absolute flop, but a lot of times it's really cool. There's another group. It's called Boyce Avenue, and they just do acoustic covers of songs. That's really cool. But probably the most unique and fascinating is a channel called Postmodern Jukebox. And what they'll do is they'll take a popular song and they'll rearrange the entire thing like in a totally different style of music. And it's really interesting watching it. Like for instance, probably one of the most like stark differences between the original and the cover. There's an artist, Megan Trainor. She does a song all about that bass.
Okay,
it's just a dumb song about
about that bass,
right. It's all it's just a dumb song about women with a large behind.
Oh, is that what that song's about? I never knew that.
Yeah. She's like, I'm all about that bass.
I'm going to stop singing that going into church from now on. I didn't realize.
Well, they redo that song as like an old, like 1920s jazz style type thing, and it's still a stupid song. But oh wow, I heard sirens out back. But sorry for the immediate pause there. But anyway, yeah, it's still a stupid song. But the creativity and how they totally redid the genre of it is really, really cool to watch. And they do that with a bunch of different stuff.
What I like, Josh, is whenever bluegrass bands they take rap songs.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
There's a group called the Cleverleys.
So funny. And they, it's very clear what they're saying, but their twang and their south, are talking about things that rap artists talk about.
Right.
Oh man, it's so funny.
Jeans.
Yeah. I was looking in our single ladies bluegrass version now.
Yeah, that's a group called the Cleverleys. I've been a fan of them for years.
Gosh, that's so funny, man. If y'all haven't heard it, how would they research that, Josh, just to see a song from there?
Just type in bluegrass covers or Cleverleys.
Oh man, so good. And if you took a picture of them, they look like a bluegrass hardcore Apalachicola man. You know what I mean? There's big old beard, stand up bass.
There's a song I think is from the either early 2000s or late 90s, whatever. And it's another one of these just stupid hip hop songs. That's just there's nothing good about it, but it's funny. It's
nothing redeeming.
My milkshake brings all the boys to the yard. Yeah. And they do a bluegrass cover of that. My milkshake brings all the boys to the yard. And they got the banjos and the mandolin and all the stuff in the background.
It's all good. I mean, obviously, you don't fake bluegrass. You got to be able to play an instrument to play bluegrass, and these guys are really, really good. You know, and I don't know if they. I think there's a handful of bands out there that are doing this.
Yeah.
I don't know if they travel around and do this. They just do it for fun or whatever. But they could be a real band.
And one of my favorites from that group is they redid "Walk Like an Egyptian" by the Bengals.
Okay.
From the 1980s.
I can see it.
It's great.
So funny. So I could talk about Linda Ronstadt for another however long we have.
Right.
I could, but I'll say this. Don and I went to an old record store a couple weeks ago and finally found some Linda Ronstadt. Here's one thing about Linda Ronstadt. I can't find any old CDs of hers. And it's not for the lack of trying. I've gone to every thrift store I know to look for Linda Ronstadt CDs, and I hadn't found any. So we finally went to an old record store, found some. There was about this much, probably about 20, 25 different ones, some of them repeats. So we got the Greatest Hits 1, Greatest Hits 2, and the very best of Linda Ronstadt. We've talked before about the quality of sound, and these two, Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the Greatest Hits, sound okay. This newer version, it's about 5 years newer, sounds fantastic. And it's just simply because of the quality of the recording, right? It's however they took the music, brought it into a newer studio or with newer equipment, and they recut from the old original tapes. They recut and made it high definition. I'll just say high definition, and it sounds so much better. The way that anecdotally, the way you can tell is that you put a CD in, and if it's an older CD, you have to turn up the volume some to be able to hear it. That's what you have to do with these two. But with this one, the very best of Linda Ronstadt, you would have to turn it down after listening to these two about 5 notches. So the whole bottom line, the whole volume is just different, and the quality is better also. So if you're going to get one, the very best of Linda Ronstadt really is what I would get if you just want 21 songs of Linda Ronstadt, and I don't think you'll be missing much by getting this. And I want to close by just.
You're going to sing Blue Bayou for us?
I'm not going to sing Blue Bayou. Close with Linda Ronstadt by saying this. I want to start doing some spiritual things with the artists that I'm talking about. Maybe if I know anything about their journey or whatever. And with Linda, from what I've learned from her book, is that she went to a Catholic school, and she has a very, very, I just call them horrendous experiences with nuns in Catholic school. And one of them was this little boy wet his pants, and the nun picked him up and hung him on a coat rack with his, whatever he was wearing, his belt loop, whatever, and let him stay there for like 5 minutes wailing like this. And the nun did that as a punishment. And she can't get that out of her head. Now, I think about that, and I go, if my pastor did that, and I was going to a school, I wouldn't want to be part of that organization either. Would you? That's just one of the things that she mentioned, and I believe, from what I can tell, she's kind of carried that through to equal to Christianity. I don't know that for sure, but that is what she said in her book, and I just wonder how many other people have done that. You know what I mean?
That's a huge deal in the church, because I find that a large percentage of people who are critical of Christianity or the Bible or whatever, a lot of times it goes back to an experience they had with people in a church. Yeah. I was actually just talking to someone last night after
the two new members of our gun club. Or participants.
Well, actually, no, not even that.
Oh, really?
After church, out in the parking lot, with a friend of ours, Matt, who was talking about the same thing, about how a church from his past really increased the severity of his struggle with God just as a whole, let alone God's influence in his own life, because he saw what was going on in that church with the people, and that sort of equated in his mind to just Christianity and the Bible and God as a whole. So that's a huge problem. Is we have to realize that people are sinful, inherently sinful, and are prone to making mistakes, and churches are populated by and run by people. Right. And so there's often times when churches make mistakes and they do things that aren't reflective of Scripture or what God would have them do. But we have to separate in our minds the difference between the character of God and the character of people. Because God never fails. People do.
I'm gonna want to say this, and I really don't care if it's controversial. I really don't care because it is the truth. Mm-hmm. From people like my father to Linda Ronstadt to just people telling stories, it seems to me, and I'll add to that, crime documentaries. Mm-hmm. It seems to me like the Catholic Church has done so much harm to the Christian faith. That's just my opinion. Like it, don't like it, I really don't care. Mm-hmm. But it does seem to me, from my father telling me things that happened to him, to reading things that happened, that the Catholic Church, back in the day anyway, has done so much harm because of the way the nuns and the priests acted towards human beings. Mm-hmm. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, in Catholicism, isn't there a certain godlike quality that we attribute to the human beings, mm-hmm. like a priest? We go to a priest and they're supposed to talk to God. We don't talk to God. We talk to the priest. So if you're viewing this person as special, as a priest, to be the one that talks to God, and you see that priest or that nun do something objectionable, why would you want to be a part of that? Mm-hmm. Right? So, I mean, wars are start over religion. That's what wars are start over. But I'm saying is the physical harm that they have done to these kids, right? Is just, I want to say it's not forgivable. It is forgivable. Not by me necessarily, but I'm not the one that you need to get forgiveness from.
Yeah. Well, the Catholic Church, I think it sort of stands out in our mind in that respect because it's been around since the first century.
Okay. That makes sense.
And it's also been like the center of not just religious power, but of political power throughout several different empires. And so it's huge, and so it's very visible. Mm-hmm. And so when something goes wrong, when someone does something that's contrary to Scripture or whatever, that might hurt someone, it's very visible, mm-hmm. because the Catholic Church is a huge organization, for lack of a better word.
Right.
That type of problem exists even in Protestant churches, because Protestant churches have done a lot of harm for Christianity as well. Mm-hmm. But it's usually not as, I guess, well advertised mm-hmm. as the Catholic Church, because when it's just a little, podunk fundamental Baptist church, mm-hmm. In rural North Carolina or something like that, and something happens where someone in the church, on staff takes advantage of a young kid, or mm-hmm. Leaves his wife and runs away with the church secretary or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's a big deal to that congregation, but it doesn't make national news.
It's not to scale,
right? It's not to scale, mm-hmm. and so like those criticisms we often have of large organizations like the Catholic Church still exist in the smaller ones mm-hmm. throughout Protestant. I mean, it's a problem throughout, because, like I said, we're all humans and we all mm-hmm. make mistakes. And I know a lot of people who have struggled with their own faith because they came from a Protestant church that did harm to them. Might not be physical harm mm-hmm. or like sexual advances or anything like that, mm-hmm. but the way sin is dealt with, if you don't toe this line, then you're anathema. You're supposed to wear a scarlet A mm-hmm. on your chest, or something equivalent to that. Mm-hmm. There's this stigma about you in that church if you've crossed this particular line instead of this particular line. Yeah. And that happens all the time, and that's not necessarily scriptural, because we're all on level ground at the foot of the cross. We all have this sin that deserves the wages of sin is death. Mm-hmm. And what we don't realize is that when the church has a bad testimony, people outside the church don't separate the sinfulness of man in those churches with the righteousness of God. Mm-hmm. They just equate everything associated with this church has to fit my model of what someone who has integrity mm-hmm. should operate. Yeah. Right? How they should operate.
Right.
And And we know that inside the church, there's a difference between the nature of God and the nature of man. But outside the church, that's why God talks a lot about our testimony. That's why he told Israel a lot about their testimonies. Like, when you do stupid stuff, it makes me look bad. And he tells us that as Christians in the New Testament too. He's like, you have this term associated with you, which has my name as the first syllable. You're Christian. And when you do stupid stuff, it makes me look bad. Because the outside world doesn't often separate who you are from who I am.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm guilty. I am guilty of that every day.
Oh, we all are.
I'm guilty of that every day.
Yep.
Well, Josh, thanks for letting me talk about Linda a little bit.
Yeah.
We're tight. I can call her Linda. Just, we're like this.
Right. So what we're talking about Shechem today kind of relates to what we were talking about cover songs, because the whole premise of a cover song is like something, a work of art exists, and I'm going to make a version of that has a different twist on it, but pays homage to the original, right? And Shechem is kind of like that, but in reverse, because a cover song, you have the original, and then sometime after it, you have the cover that pays homage to the original. Well, Shechem was a picture of Christ, but it was a picture of Christ that came before the original, but it paid homage to the original. And so it's interesting, the parallels between those two ideas. And Shechem, when we talked about it, when we talked about it previously, we mentioned how Shechem, it has a lot of history in the Old Testament. It was where Jacob, when Jacob was moving from his father's house, or his uncle's house rather, Uncle Laban. He took his family and he went to Shechem and lived there for a time. But then there was a fallout or disagreement between Jacob's 12 sons and the men of Shechem, who were interested in their sister Dinah. And as a result of that conflict, Jacob realized that there's some animosity that remains after that conflict. And so he said, we're going to have to move. And so before he moved, he took his family and they stopped at an oak tree in Shechem, and he buried his family's idols there and said, we're not going to serve idols. We're going to serve the one true God. And that ended up being a really significant event in the life of this family who was eventually going to become a nation, because Jacob and his family, his 12 sons, eventually ended up in Egypt, because we have that whole account of Joseph being the youngest son at the time, being the favored. His brothers hated him, sold him into bondage, into slavery, and he ends up in Egypt, basically paving the way for when this worldwide famine came. His family was able to take refuge from that famine in Egypt and live with Moses, and they spent over 4 centuries in Egypt. And they were originally welcome guests in Egypt, but eventually a Pharaoh that didn't know Joseph came along and enslaved them, and that's where we have the whole account of Israel being enslaved in Egypt. Well, 400 years later, Moses, under Moses' leadership, God delivers them from Egypt, and they go through the wilderness. They stop at Mount Sinai, all this kind of stuff, on their way to the promised land, the land that God had originally promised to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob, telling them that this land is going to be yours, but you're going to spend 430 years in a land that's not yours, while the people around you in this land, they're going to get progressively worse and worse and worse. And so you're going to be in Egypt while that happens, until the iniquity of these people is full. Then you're going to come back, and we're going to deal with all that stuff. Well, you get past the wilderness wanderings. They're back. They're back in the promised land. They cross the Jordan River. They take out Jericho. They take out Ai. They travel northward to these 2 mountains, Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, and in the valley between them is the city called Shechem. It's that same Shechem that Jacob, originally went to, where he buried his family's idols. And in this place, Shechem, they reaffirm their covenant with God. God reaffirms his covenant with Israel. And Joshua sort of issues this challenge to Israel, saying, we're in the land. This is Joshua 24. It says, we're in the land of Canaan. Canaan, and I'm paraphrasing here, Canaan is full of nations that serve other gods. We come from a group of people that served other gods. But there's one true God that we have an opportunity and a choice to serve. He's like, you can choose the gods that you want to worship, whether the gods that your fathers worshipped or the gods that they worship in the land where we dwell. He says, but as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. Talking about that one true God, the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. And he did that in Shechem. And the Bible mentions something really, really interesting. He did that next to an oak tree in Shechem. So we have that concept of an oak tree in Shechem where Jacob buried his family's idols and said, we're not going to do this anymore. Centuries later, Josh comes to an oak tree in Shechem and talks to Israel and says, we're not going to serve the idols. These idols, we're going to serve God. Because Israel agreed with him and said, we're doing the same thing. We're going to serve God. Well, as they start to populate Canaan, part of this whole thing about this being the promised land that they inherit is Canaan was going to be divided up into 12 areas. Each tribe would get their own tract of land. And all throughout the book of Joshua, once they, do most of their conquests, there's part of Joshua that reads kind of like a land survey. This tribe is going to get this property that's described by this river and this city, and you go north this much and you turn left, and they start describing all these different areas. But there's one tribe that didn't get anything, that didn't get any land, I should say. That was the tribe of Levi, the tribe of priests. And God made an interesting statement. He said that the Levites, they're not going to inherit land like the other tribes are. He says, I am going to be their inheritance, because they were the ones that were to take care of the tabernacle, later the temple, all that stuff. However, the tribe of Levi grows just like all the other tribes do, and then there's more Levites than there is space to put them in the temple or in the around the tabernacle, and so God sets up a set of 6 cities, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 6 cities throughout the land of Israel. That's never like more than a day's travel from any point in Israel. And he said these are the cities that are going to be set apart for the tribe of Levi. So when it's your turn to spend a 2-week shift taking care of the temple, you're where the temple is. You're doing that thing. But for the rest of the year, you go back to your home in one of these cities that we set up. Shechem was one of them, but these cities were called cities of refuge. And where these cities start to become covers, like we were saying, is what the significance of these cities were. Because if I were to kill someone, if I were to kill you, it was incumbent upon your next of kin to avenge that death, because they didn't have like a police force, justice system like we have. If I murder you, then I deserve punishment. It's the responsibility of your next of kin, your near kinsman, to find me and kill me, to avenge that death. That was set apart. That was a rule in the law. It was called the revenger of blood. And so now if I accidentally killed you, like we're working, in a field and, we're busting away with sledgehammers, the head comes loose, accidentally hits you and kills you. That wasn't something I did on purpose, but the fact still remains I killed you.
Manslaughter.
Right. It's like involuntary manslaughter, right? And so there's still this requirement for your next of kin to avenge that death, even though I didn't do that on purpose. There was no like hatred in my heart or malice toward you that resulted in me murdering you. It's just accidental. So in that case, I could run to one of these 6 cities, because they're called cities of refuge. And because I unwittingly killed someone, I could go to one of these cities, stand at the gates, lay my hands on the gates, and seek refuge there, and say, I would be given a fair trial in front of the priests to determine, like, am I lying about this being an accident, or was it really an accident? And if I'm innocent, then I can seek refuge there.
Or if you're guilty of manslaughter.
Yeah, if you're guilty of manslaughter, like it wasn't on purpose.
Innocent of murder.
Right. So I did kill someone, but it wasn't on purpose. It was an accident. I can seek refuge there, and that refuge exists until the current high priest dies. Now, if I ever go outside that city of refuge, the Avenger of Blood can find me and kill me, because he still has that assignment. But as long as I'm in that city, as long as that high priest is alive, I have that refuge. I'm safe from the Avenger of Blood. Well, centuries later, we get to the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, and the author of Hebrews is decoding a lot of the symbolism in the Old Testament. And he makes an interesting statement that relates back to these cities of refuge. And in Hebrews 6, verse 18 says, by 2 immutable things in which it was impossible for God to lie, we might have a strong consolation, who have fled for refuge to lay hold upon the hope set before us, which hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, and which entereth into that within the veil, whether the forerunner is for us entered, even Jesus, made an high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And so what's that saying? There's to unpack that, saying, as sinners, we all know that verse, the wages of sin is death. Well, why is it death? Well, as sinners, I've basically murdered the image of God that I've been created in. Like, because I've sinned, I have to die. So I've unwittingly murdered myself. And I'm made in the image of God. And that's the whole point of avenging murders, because if you've murdered someone, you've killed someone in hatred that was made in the image of God. And so you're striking at that image. And we've done that to ourselves by virtue of the fact that we're sinners. It's not something that we necessarily did on purpose. We didn't come out of the womb thinking, I'm going to kill myself, So it wasn't something we did, out of hatred, because, we want to do that. So where can we flee for refuge? We flee to Christ. And in Christ, that is the refuge that we run to, where we get, where we're safe from the Avenger of Blood. In this case, who is the Avenger of Blood? What is it that requires me to die as justification to make recompense for this sin? Well, that's the law. The law is what tells us the wages of sin is death. The law is what tells us that if you have transgressed against God, then blood has to be shed to atone for that. And so the law is that Avenger of Blood, but who do we run to escape the Avenger of Blood? We run to Christ. And what's amazing about Christ is what's referred to here in the last verses of chapter 6 of Hebrews. It says, he's a high priest forever. He never dies. And so that refuge never goes away. Our salvation is eternally secure because we have a high priest that never dies. And so what's interesting about Shechem is it was one of these cities of refuge that pointed forward to the refuge that we would one day have in Christ for all of eternity. And Hebrews 6 points to that and explains that symbolism, what that meant, those cities of refuge. And there were 6 of them: Shechem, Ramoth, Hebron, Kadesh, Bezer, and Golan. These were distributed throughout the land of Israel. And when you look at the names of them, the meanings of those Hebrew names give different little pointers to different attributes and characteristics of Christ, the Messiah. It's really neat how all those things tie together. So that's Shechem part 2.
Okay, very good.
I wanted to kind of go over that.
Josh, quick question. Those cities, did somebody escape to those cities or one of those cities depending on how close they were, or was there certain characteristics of each city that would be more likely to forget? You know what I mean? Or did people do it strategically, or did they just go to the one that's closest?
Well, the strategic thing about them was their placement. That there were never, no matter where you were in the nation of Israel, you were never farther than a day's passage from them. So you go to whichever one was closest.
Okay.
But one of the interesting details about it, it wasn't just for Israelites. Anyone, even someone who wasn't an Israelite, this refuge was offered to them as well. And that's kind of a neat little Easter egg in the Old Testament, that this salvation was offered to everybody, not just a particular group of people. And that's discussed in the New Testament as well.
Well, hearing what you say about that, I have so many questions that I want to ask here, but you start thinking about the corruption, how easily that system could be corrupted. You know, who's in charge? Who's going to make the decision? Is there a group of people, and those people are they elected or are they appointed? There's so many things that could go wrong.
And it did get corrupted over time.
I'm sure.
Just like a lot of the stuff within the nation of Israel did, and they suffered as a result of it. But I mean, it has ties to, if you've ever heard the term Sanhedrin.
Yes.
The Sanhedrin was a court within the nation of Israel that would be responsible for trying cases of capital punishment.
Okay.
And the interesting thing is, there is a promise back in the Old Testament that said, this was in Genesis when Jacob was giving blessings to all of his children before he died. He pointed to Judah and said, the scepter will not depart from you until Shiloh come. It was a messianic prophecy that you're going to be the tribe that holds the administrative authority within the nation of Israel, and it's going to stay that way until the Messiah comes, until Shiloh comes. And so we see, as the nation of Israel begins, it grows. We have the leadership, the reign of King Saul, King David, King Solomon, and then the nation splits into Israel to the north, Judah to the south. Judah continued with that Davidic line of kings, who was from the tribe of Judah, and so the administrative authority still stayed with the tribe of Judah. But even after the southern kingdom was conquered by the Babylonians, and and then the Persians came into power, then the Greeks, and then the Romans, there was always, when it came to trying cases of capital punishment, no matter what nation that they were subservient to, those nations always allowed them to kind of judge their own, specifically in this court of the Sanhedrin, until they made the Romans so angry that the Romans stripped the Sanhedrin of all of its power, deposed the high priest, instituted a Roman high priest. This is all in the New Testament. And we read in the history books that when they stripped the Sanhedrin of its power, that the religious leaders of the day were walking through the streets, wailing, renting their clothes, piling ashes on their heads, and just basically in an emotional uproar, because they said, the scepter has departed from Judah, the word of God has failed. But what they didn't realize was the timing of that, because remember that original promise was, the scepter will not depart until Shiloh comes, until the Messiah comes. When the Sanhedrin was stripped of its power, it was right after Christ was born. And so that prophecy was fulfilled. Judah, the Messiah had come, and the scepter never departed from Judah until the Messiah came.
How about that?
And they didn't realize that. They just thought the word of God had failed. They didn't know that in a little town called Bethlehem,
How about that?
The Messiah had come.
Nobody had posted it yet. Nobody put it on social media.
Yeah, nobody put it on social media yet.
How about that? Pretty good. Josh, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Chris, thank you very much. Appreciate you. And thanks for listening and watching. And we'll be here. Are we going to be here next week?
Chris won't be.
Chris won't be.
To be determined.
To be determined. We might. It's the 3rd of July right now. So if we don't have one for another week, you'll know why. But I don't see any reason you and I can't get together and do it. We'll see what happens. Thanks for listening, watching. Love y'all. Love you, Donna. Talk to you soon. Bye.